Okay, so are you ready for this? I think we should just dive right into this deep dive. You've got like all these notes about conquering the fear of judgment for creators. It's a pretty big one, right? And you've been doing some serious research, I see. The courage to be disliked in there. The subtle art of not giving a F. Even some notes from a podcast called The Bold Creator. You've got like philosophy, psychology, real world examples.
Yeah, this is something that like so many creators face, right? It's like this fear. It's incredibly common, but there is good news. We can actually break free from this fear and unlock some serious creative potential.
Okay, cool. I'm glad to hear that because this is something I definitely struggle with. Um, I'm noticing this spotlight effect idea popping up in your notes a few times.
Hmm.
That's basically that feeling, right? Like everyone's watching you, judging every move. Like what if I share something and people just hate it?
You're right on the money there. Luckily, there's some good news from psychology about this. Research shows that we tend to like really overestimate how much attention people are paying to us. Yeah, you've got that study by Gilovich there, right? Where they had people wear those embarrassing t-shirts. They thought way more people noticed than actually did.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So it's like we're all just walking around with these imaginary spotlights in our heads.
Pretty much. Yeah, and the funny thing is, everyone else is probably doing the same thing. So if people aren't really scrutinizing us that much, why are we letting their judgments hold us back?
Such a good point. It's like we're giving them all this power that they don't even actually have.
And that brings up this whole thing with Adlerian psychology that I see in your notes. The whole idea of seeking external validation is a trap. Like I get excited about a project and then I'm like, wait, what if people think it's dumb?
I hear you. It's like so common. Imagine if instead of seeking approval from others, you focused on like what truly excites you. Like what if your primary source of validation came from within?
That would be pretty awesome.
Right.
But letting go of that need for external validation, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
I mean, we crave connection, right?
Of course, it's a process for sure. And this is where I think those Stoic philosophers can offer some good guidance.
Oh, yeah?
Remember that Marcus Aurelius quote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events."
I remember highlighting that one.
It's about focusing on what we can control, right? Our thoughts, actions, our effort, other people's opinions. Those are outside of our control.
You can't force everyone to like your work.
Exactly.
So it's like you're choosing where to direct your energy. Instead of agonizing over what other people might think, you focus on honing your craft, telling your story, creating from a place of passion and authenticity.
And that brings up The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F by Mark Manson, which you have here. The whole thing about choosing your battles and having a limited number of fecks to give.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Like what deserves your fecks more? The imagined judgments of others or creating something meaningful?
So we're seeing some patterns here, right? Don't sweat the imaginary spotlight. Stop seeking external validation. But there's this other part, right? Sometimes that fear of judgment, it feels so paralyzing. Like it keeps me from even starting.
Yeah, that feeling is real for sure. It's like perfectionism takes over and it whispers, what if it's not good enough?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, perfection, it's an illusion, and often it's the very thing holding us back.
Right.
Holding us back from making any progress at all.
Okay, so how do we break free from that? Like
Yeah.
sometimes I'm so scared of putting myself out there that I end up doing nothing.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like we get stuck, right? And it makes me think of Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. It's in your stack there somewhere. He talks about how sharing your work, like as you go embracing the process, that can be key to overcoming perfectionism.
Yeah, I read that one too. It was good. But showing your work before it's like perfect, isn't that terrifying? What if people judge my half-baked ideas?
It can be, for sure. But think about it this way. When you share your process, you open yourself up to feedback. You learn from others. You connect with people who like resonate with your journey. You turn it into like a collaborative thing.
So instead of like hiding away until everything is perfect, we should embrace that messiness.
Exactly. And you know what? It's funny. A lot of times those like imperfect creations, the ones we share early on, those are the ones that really resonate with people. There's something authentic about seeing the behind the scenes, you know?
It's like those early YouTube videos from Mr. Beast and Ali Abdaal I have in my notes here. Like their early stuff, it wasn't perfect, but it was real and people connected with it. And look at them now.
Right. They didn't wait for perfection. They just started putting themselves out there. They iterated as they went, and that's how they honed their craft. They found their voice, and then they built their success.
Okay, so share the journey.
Yeah.
Embrace imperfection. Got it. But there's still this like fear of failing. Like what if I put all this work into something and it just flops?
Oh, I hear you. That fear of failure is real, for sure. It's something all creators face. But what if instead of viewing flops as like defeats, we saw them as data points?
Data points.
Yeah. Think about it. Each setback, each piece of critical feedback, it helps us learn, right? It helps us adjust course and ultimately get closer to creating something that resonates. It's like running an experiment. You gather data, you analyze it, and you use that to inform your next move.
I like that analogy. That's good. It takes the sting out of it.
Right. And it goes back to that stoic wisdom we were talking about earlier. We can't control the outcome, but we can control our effort and our response. So instead of letting that fear of failure paralyze us, we can choose to see setbacks as valuable feedback like signposts pointing us in the right direction.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. It's about focusing on what we can control, embracing imperfection,
Mhm.
reframing failure as data. But honestly, sometimes the hardest part isn't even failing publicly. It's that inner critic, that voice that says, you're not good enough, your ideas are stupid.
Ugh, yeah, that inner critic. It can be brutal. It's like having that constant negative feedback loop.
Exactly. And sometimes it feels louder than any external criticism.
Yeah.
So how do we quiet that inner critic
Yeah.
and find the confidence to keep creating?
There's no magic button,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but there are definitely things we can do to weaken its grip. And it starts with understanding where that inner critic comes from.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So where does it come from?
It's often a bunch of things mixed together,
Hmm.
past experiences, societal messages, even the fear of judgment itself. We internalize these messages and start to believe them, and that fuels the negativity.
I guess it makes sense. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others, like those highlight reels we see on social media. It's no wonder we feel inadequate.
And that's why it's so important to remember that comparison is the thief of joy. It's like a recipe for self-doubt, and it just keeps you stuck.
So how do we escape that trap? How do we find our own unique voice?
It starts with recognizing that you have a story to tell. You have unique experiences, perspectives, insights. They're valuable simply because they are yours.
That's a good point.
Your audience isn't looking for perfection. They're looking for authenticity, for connection, for someone who speaks to their hearts and minds.
So instead of trying to fit into some mold, we should celebrate what makes us different.
Yes, and you know what? The more you embrace your own voice, the less you'll feel the need to compare yourself to others. You find this creative liberation that comes from expressing your authentic self.
I love that. But it feels like there's so much noise out there, so many voices, all vying for attention. How do we cut through all that and actually get people to listen?
That's a great question. And it makes me think of the 70% rule. It's in your notes there somewhere.
A 70% rule. Okay, remind me, what was that about again?
Basically, it's this idea that can help us get over that feeling of being overwhelmed. It says if your project feels about 70% done, you share it. It's about pushing past perfectionism and just recognizing that done is better than perfect.
70% done? I don't know. It still feels kind of scary. What if it's just not good enough yet?
Yeah, but remember, people aren't analyzing your every move. And sharing early lets you get feedback, iterate, and improve. It's like your audience becomes your collaborators.
Oh, okay. So it's more about progress over perfection.
Exactly. And it takes some of the pressure off. You don't need to have it all figured out up front. You can launch, learn, and adapt along the way.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. But what about negative feedback? How do we deal with that?
Well, you have to remember that not all criticism is created equal. Some feedback will be useful, it'll offer real insights that you can use to improve. And then some feedback will be based on personal preference, or it might just not even be aligned with your vision at all.
So how do we filter out the noise?
You got to understand your own goals and values first.
Yeah.
What are you even trying to achieve? Who is your ideal audience? Once you know those things, you can look at feedback through that lens.
Okay, so it's about defining my own criteria for success. But what if the criticism is coming from people I really care about, like my friends or family? That can be really tough.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And in those cases, it's important to remember that you can't please everyone. And their feedback might come from a good place, but ultimately you have to trust your gut. You have to make the choices that feel right for you and your work.
It's like finding your own voice, right?
Exactly. And the more you create from that place of authenticity, the more you'll attract the right people, the people who get you and appreciate your style. Remember, you're not for everyone, and that's okay.
And it goes back to that stoic idea too, right?
Mhm.
Focus on what you can control. We can control our effort and our response to feedback.
Absolutely. And when you come at it from that place, criticism loses its power. It becomes less about you personally and more about information that can help you grow.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I have a whole new way of looking at this. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Remember, creating is a journey. There will be ups and downs and moments of doubt, but the important thing is to keep creating, Keep learning and keep sharing your voice with the world.
That's great advice. And for anyone listening who's feeling stuck, remember, do what you can with what you have where you are. You don't have to be perfect. Just start.
We're all cheering for you.